What are core values and why are they important? As I've said before, I believe that the secret to a great life is building self-confidence. And the methodology to build self-confidence is to live with integrity. And integrity is a set of core values. So when we say what are core values, one way to look at it is if you think of integrity as a diamond, then core values are all the different sides, the facets of that diamond. So each one of them make up the diamond when combined with the others. But if you were to say spin the diamond around, you'd only see one at a time. Parts that make up the whole. So living with integrity is to consistently have your behavior line up with your core values. Now, nobody's perfect. And in fact, you learn a lot about integrity from getting it wrong. But if you think of it like a spectrum, the more often your behavior aligns with your values, the more integrity you have. The more integrity you have, the more confidence you have. The more confidence you have, the better your life is. So the aim is not really perfection, but constant progress on aligning your behavior with your core values so that you have overall integrity. And the longer you sustain overall integrity, the more confident you'll feel. Good place to go with this, but I'm actually going to start with what values are not, because I think the distractions, the things we confuse with principles and morals to live by, are what take us off course from our integrity, which I believe is innate. I think integrity is what you discover when you take away all the bullshit that's been piled on top of it ever since you were a little child. Now, some of this is semantics, so I use the word values in a specific way, and it may be different to other definitions you've heard. Let me sort of define it by telling you what it's not, okay? Values are not virtues. A virtue is a value described by somebody else. So the 10 Commandments in the church, for example, those are virtues. The 4 virtues of Stoicism, the philosophy, the code of conduct at your business, the rules that you had at home delivered by your parents, those are virtues. Those are what other people say is good behavior. Your core values may not align with anybody else's virtues. They may align as well, but that'll be coincidence rather than conditioning. So when we start to look at what your core values are, I want you to let go of what you've been told by others is the right way to live and try to get in touch with what you believe is the right way to live, regardless of what they've said. It might mean that your core values sometimes contradict what the people at church told you and what your parents told you and what your boss wants. And that's okay. Goals, they are outcome independent. That means that values are all about your intention and your behavior, not the result it generates. The result is out of our control, and therefore it's got nothing to do with values. When we have a goal, when I want this to happen, this external thing outside of me, or even an internal goal, like I want to feel this way or I want to think these things, we're not talking about values. Now, there's nothing wrong with goals. But what I encourage you to do is first know what your values are and then have goals that help you live by your values rather than goals that contradict it. For example, people might say that they have the value of money or the value of being respected by others or something like that. And yet you can do everything right by your integrity and not get money from it and not get respected by certain people. And that's okay. It's very important you learn to measure your values intrinsically. Did you do the right thing by your own code? Not how did other people react and what instant rewards did I get? Because those are not reliable measures of your integrity. Values are not rules. There's no hard and fast rule that you must live by in order to have integrity. In fact, if you are living by rules, then you're playing it safe and taking the path of least resistance. You're just a robot following a code. Values are more nuanced and they're contextual. You know, being honest, for example, as a value, might mean saying a completely different thing today than what you said yesterday because the truth has changed. If you think of a virtue type rule, say, thou shalt not steal, you know, there might be a time when your values say this is the right time to steal something, and you would have to go with that to have integrity. Values are completely dependent on in the moment context, and there's no rule that covers all context. So you have to embrace the idea that living by your core values is going to require some fucking thinking. You're going to have to look at each situation as it happens and go, what's the right value here and what would it mean to live by at this time? Rather than going, I'm just going to follow these 10 rules forever no matter what happens. It's independent. And that means you can live by them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in any situation with no exceptions. There is no situation or moment in time where you cannot live by your core values. So if you're in a situation and you think, oh, I couldn't live by my values in that situation, then you're not really thinking of values. You're thinking of something that's dependent on something else. For example, a classic example is family. People think of family as a value, but your family has to cooperate in some way for you to live by that value. I mean, you have to have a family to live by that value, and that's something that can be taken away from you. Or it's people that might not cooperate even if you're doing everything right. Whereas if, say, the value was to be courageous, you can always be courageous with your family. You can be courageous in a prison cell. You can be courageous in a war. You can be courageous on holiday. It doesn't matter where you are. You can always find some uncomfortable thing to do. So basically, you know it's not a core value if you can't control it at all times and if you didn't come up with it yourself. So enough of what it isn't. What is a core value? Core values are a set of principles that guide your decision-making, like a compass pointing towards true north. They give integrity and intentions to your actions. They have words like curiosity, honesty, courage. They have an intention that has a clear sort of practical guidance with it, but it's a fluid practical guidance that will, match the context you're in. When you're living by a core value, in any given situation, you're going to look at that situation. You're going to judge which value is called for right here and now. What's the best side of that diamond that I need to be accessing? And then once you've chosen which application of that value is most appropriate for this setting, and sometimes it'll be the first time you've ever done this action, even though you've lived by this value many times before. For example, if you imagine you're in a basic conflict and the value is assertiveness, well, assertiveness is going to be a lot different if the person's being violent to if they're just being verbal. Right? Assertiveness is not the same thing in those situations. And even if the person is being violent, if it's a 3-year-old toddler being violent, or if it's a fully grown man, again, different actions are required. So the situation might have some stability, like in confrontations, you're always assertive and curious and respectful. But how you do it this time depends what's happening. A key element to core values is that your in-the-moment thoughts and feelings don't really matter. Is to say that your core values come from that compass of integrity, this kind of inner thing that's deeper than your emotions, deeper than your beliefs. You've had it since you're a little kid. You were in touch with it once many, many years ago, and then you got conditioned and programmed to live a different way. But you can live by it without necessarily being on board with it up here. Let's say, for example, that you're really stressed and tired, and you don't want to be compassionate about your child's, sore knee right now. But you can still get down on one knee and put a plaster on and kiss them on the head. You can still behave compassionately, even though you're not really on board with it in terms of thoughts and feelings. Or you can stand up for yourself, even if you're feeling scared. Or you can take responsibility for your life, even if you're feeling lazy. And the thoughts in your head say, just leave it till tomorrow. So quite often living by core values, especially the uncomfortable times, it's about going against your thoughts and feelings, contradicting them, with behavior that at a deeper level is the right thing to do. A very simplistic way of looking at it is that core values are about doing what's right rather than what's easy. Your values in general will be personal to you, and they will align with your whole life experience and your interpretation of life, what you believe is right and good, what you believe is healthy, what you believe will sort you out in the long term, even if it sacrifices short-term wins. It's sensible in terms of well-being of everyone involved as best as possible. And it matches how you would like to be treated by others. It matches how you would like everyone to behave. It's kind of your ideal person, but you being it. When you look at people that you admire and respect and you consider them to be good, they are representing what you think your core values are. People who you think of as unhealthy or evil, harmful, wrong, they're contradicting your core values. Their behaviors and their intentions are the opposite of what you think you should be doing yourself. Your core values should be easily translated into behavior. Right? If you've got a core value that's just really conceptual and you don't know what to do with it, that's not really helpful. It needs to be something that as soon as the word comes up in a given moment, you know what to do next. So, for example, if the value is responsibility, then you could have a basic definition that it's solution focused. So if you're going to live by the value of responsibility, you're looking for a problem and how to solve it, right? Very quickly, you're going to be looking at practical behaviors. Core values often require short-term discomfort, and this is where I think most people lose track. Most people are trying to stay comfortable all the time and have integrity, and those two just don't go together. All right, you got to earn integrity. You got to pay up front for a good life. If you're comfortable all the time, there's a good chance you're breaching your core values. If, for example, I've got a core value like curiosity, which I do, and in good times, it just means learning and having fun taking on new information. But in tough times, it means being humble. It means admitting that I'm wrong. It means opening up beliefs I've had for years and allowing them to be challenged. So every value I can possibly think of will, and I promise you this, cause moments of discomfort for you. And that discomfort doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It actually means you're doing it right. Values quite often sacrifice short-term gratification for long-term delayed reward. Living by your core values is like taking care of your future self, doing what he will wish that you had done. Now, if you look back to yourself 10 years ago and you think of all the things you wish that that person had done differently, those were all breaches of your core values, right? That person set you up to fail. They've made life harder for you. When we look at core values or integrity, is you're making your future self's life much easier by putting in the hard work now. For example, eating healthy. You'd just much rather eat ice cream and chocolate, but that obese version of you in 10 years is going to really regret that. So you eat a salad instead so that that version of you in 10 years can play with their kids without running out of energy. And once put it to me like this: be the man you hope your daughter brings home one day. And you can reverse this based on gender, be the woman that you hope your son brings home one day. There's certain things you can think of as if this was another person that you met, what would make you go, fuck, that is a decent person. Like, oh, I wish everyone was like this person. And I mean, looking beyond sort of a sappy, fawning people pleaser or someone with lots of materialistic gains, but they were, Machiavellian and harmful to get those gains. But the person themselves is so admirable, so easy to respect. You look to them for guidance. You trust everything they say. How do you become that person? What principles does that person live by consistently? What kind of behaviors are you likely to see by them in common situations? That's the kind of thinking when it comes to core values. What you're looking for is to be the type of person that even if you lost the outcome, you go to bed happy with yourself, which is basically what confidence is. So let's say you quit your job because they're asking you to compromise yourself. Now, you might go to bed a bit worried about money that night, but not worried about your integrity. Not worried that you're going to, you guys have all compromised your integrity before. You know how it feels later on. You're like, I'm such a pussy, like, if only I'd said that thing. That if only, that what if, that, I wish I could just. Those kind of feelings eat you alive. That's the absence of confidence, that shame. If you're like, okay, I lost that one, but I lost with integrity. I would have had to compromise myself to win, so it's not worth it. And as I said, integrity is just living this way more often than you don't. You aim for 100%, you never quite get there, but you fall somewhere close and you'll be a very confident person. Rule of thumb is if you're living with integrity more than 80% of the time, you can rest assured you're going to be very confident. And actually, that other 20% is pretty easy to make gains on when you're already at 80. And I'll be harsh with most of you here. The reason I do this work and the reason I have clients, because most people are nowhere near 80. Most people significantly compromise their core values, either because they don't know them, it's an awareness problem, or because they're too scared to live by them, it's a courage problem. All right, those are the two main issues I work with my clients. And I look around in the world and I just see so much evidence that people are breaching their own values. To me, it's obvious. The way they have to justify their behaviors, the way they binge on things to make themselves feel better, the way they avoid stuff that they know they want. Like, it's just obvious to me. You get that number up, you get up to near 80% of the time your behavior aligns with those values, you can rest assured you're going to feel pretty good about yourself. If you'd like to accelerate the process and get there really quickly, like by the end of this year, get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and we'll talk about coaching.